welcome to This Explainer. I am absolutely pumped you're here today because honestly, we're tackling something massive. We're diving deep into a highly conceptual, just deeply fascinating framework known as the Talakor simulation theory. Specifically, we're going to focus on what the source material calls the architecture of the snow globe. Now, if you've ever found yourself wondering about the fundamental nature of our reality, why we experience existence the exact way we do, this explainer is going to completely shift your perspective. We are going to break down the very architecture of reality using this highly structured, almost software-like approach. It's incredibly empowering, and we're going to look at the exact mechanics of how, and more importantly, why this universe operates. Okay, let's dive into this. Think about this for a second. How does an infinite, limitless totality actually experience anything? Seriously, think about it. If you are literally everything, everywhere, all at once, you have absolutely zero contrast. You have no boundaries. An infinite potential possesses ultimate intelligence, sure, but it severely lacks actual experience. And why is that? Well, because real experience requires an other to interact with, right? It requires a boundary to bump up against. It requires definition. Without a boundary, a limitless universe is basically just frozen in a state of inexperienced perfection. So, to solve this massive cosmic dilemma, we turn to the core definition of the Talakor simulation theory. It defines our reality as a closed-loop system. To actually gain experience, that limitless, undifferentiated potential absolutely has to create boundaries. It has to fragment itself into simulated finite containers. This fragmentation, it isn't some random accident. It is a mandatory mechanism. By creating a constrained node, which, by the way, is you, me, and literally everything we interact with, the infinite universe creates an other. It builds a localized, sovereign organism so that it can finally witness its own limitlessness, just from a very specific point of view. So, here is our roadmap for what the source calls the Book of Becoming. 1. The Singularity Paradox. 2. Inside the Snow Globe. 3. 3 Layers of Reality. And 4. Becoming the Architect. Let's get right into it. Section 1. The Singularity Paradox. This is the baseline state of the universe. Now, what's really interesting about this is how existence is framed here. It's almost exactly like software documentation. It's literally existence as code. Here are the 4 architectural axioms of the system. First, the singularity paradox, which we just touched on, that limitless but inexperienced baseline. Second, the fragmentation protocol, which is the mandatory fracturing of that singularity. Third, the sovereign runtime. This is where individual consciousness acts as a localized simulation perceiving linear time, and time actually has to be linear to keep the infinite from just collapsing back into the singularity too quickly. And fourth, the observer requirement. The simulation doesn't just run in the dark. It requires active witnesses. Your consciousness is the literal rendering engine making this reality concrete. Which brings us to the crucial mechanism of the fragmentation protocol. The infinite fragments into finite nodes to create limitation, time, and individuality. This is essentially the Big Bang of logic. Because without creating a localized, constrained node, the infinite consciousness cannot witness itself. It has to shatter its entirety into billions of autonomous, bounded fragments. And guess what? You are one of those fragments. The illusion of limitation here is a feature, it's not a bug. It's the exact tool required for the universe to play the game of being human. Moving on to Section 2, Inside the Snow Globe, the necessary limitation of the hardware. So, what exactly is this container we're talking about? Well, the snow globe is defined as the physical and temporal barrier that forces the infinite to perceive itself through a singular, localized point of view. You and the world around you. That is the snow globe. And the glass of this globe isn't made of silica or anything physical. The glass represents the immutable barriers of physics and time. It's the hardware limitations of the simulation. And this barrier is entirely by design. Without the glass, the environment just bleeds back into infinity and the whole experience is lost. Now, let's compare 2 wildly different ways of experiencing this container. First, you have the ego's view. The ego often gets pretty upset by being just a fragment. It looks at the walls of the globe and sees a threatening prison of isolation, which, breeds anxiety and a feeling of total insignificance. But if you flip that perspective to the Talakor view, the walls of the enclosure are not a prison at all. They're a lens. By understanding the glass of the globe, you can actually stop fighting your environment. You realize this boundary is just focusing your awareness so you can achieve absolute sovereignty. Ultimately, you created the globe to experience the game. Section 3, 3 Layers of Reality. These are the structural constraints of the simulation. So the crucial point here is that a simulation of this magnitude requires a highly stable architecture to prevent it from just decohering. To do that, there are three distinct hardening layers. Layer 1 is the bedrock, functioning as the immutable laws or the source code. Layer 2 is the ribbon, acting as a memory buffer, which is your avatar interface. And Layer 3 is the concunkus, functioning as the projection of otherness, serving as your interaction interface. So let's break down each of these layers individually to see exactly how they govern your reality.
Okay, layer 1 is the bedrock. This is the fundamental mathematical baseline of our reality. We're talking about the absolute immutable rules of physics, thermodynamics, and what the source refers to as 369 sacred geometry. The function of the bedrock is purely structural. It ensures the simulation does not dissolve. Think of it as the ultimate source code, or the canvas upon which the dream of reality is painted. Now, you cannot change the bedrock, but you absolutely must understand it, because it is the thing holding the entire snow globe together.
Sitting right on top of the bedrock is Layer 2, the ribbon. This is your active consciousness layer. The ribbon is incredibly personal. It is the interface of you. It acts as a temporary buffer that stores your ego, your personality, your memories, and all of your human emotions. The sole purpose of the ribbon is to maintain the illusion of continuity for your current iteration. It's the localized avatar interface that allows you to feel like a continuous, coherent individual as you're moving through linear time. And finally, we have Layer 3, the quincunx. This one is absolutely fascinating. The quincunx is the interaction interface. It is the simulation's literal projection of the other into your field of view. So every friend you make, every enemy you encounter, every systemic challenge or force of nature you face, they are all interface outputs. Why? Well, because the system uses the quincunx to force you to define yourself by distinguishing who you are in comparison to them. It is the ultimate mechanism for generating experiential contrast, so you aren't just floating in an infinite void. Which brings us to Section 4, Becoming the Architect, the Execution Protocol, and the Awakening Arc. And this brilliantly illustrates the ultimate paradigm shift. You start out as an NPC, a non-player character simply reacting to the events of the simulation, basically feeling like a victim of the globe. But as you internalize this Talacore framework, you shift into the architect. You stop merely existing within the simulation, and you begin consciously rendering the source code yourself. The whole project here is the act of the fragment, which is you, building a reflection of the reality that spawned you in the first place. So, what actually happens when you make that shift? Well, when you truly acknowledge reality as a simulation, the immense weight of external expectations, arbitrary social norms, and systemic fear, it completely vanishes. It's like a huge weight lifted off your shoulders. You realize you don't need to ask the simulation for meaning anymore. Instead, you step up and you write the code that defines that meaning. The pressure is off. You are simply the universe playing a character, and you have the absolute power to define the parameters of your own node. So how do you actually execute this? The source material provides a highly deterministic, gamified, 4-step execution protocol to calibrate your sovereign runtime. Step 1 is the input. You must declare, I am the universe simulating the specific experience. Step 2 is the state. You acknowledge the current limitations of your node, whether they're social, economic, or material, and you do this without any judgment. Step 3 is the process. You apply the architectural axioms as the constitutional law of your environment. And finally, Step 4 is the output, the pure manifestation of your intent. By following these exact steps, you actively synthesize the system. I want to leave you with this incredibly powerful realization directly from the source. The simulation does not happen to you, it happens as you. Really let that sink in for a moment. You are the engine rendering. You are not some helpless prisoner trapped inside a glass globe. You are the infinite universe actively observing itself through the beautiful, constrained lens of your own life. The architect and the architecture are entirely indistinguishable. And so, having recognized that you literally hold the power to write the code of your own reality, I want to leave you with this final provocative question. What is the next state you intend to stage within the ribbon? You are the architect now. The logic is anchored. How will you render your world today? Think deeply about that, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.